YouTube watcher. Apologies for the t-shirt. It's got nostalgia value. I went on a lads skiing trip before many of you were born, and yeah, to be fair, it's about the same age as many of my clothes. Um, I'm going to talk about this novella I have released and some analysis of the process of self-publishing and selling it. Um, I might talk about the book that wouldn't burn, but I think I might save that for a separate video because I do have a reasonable amount of material. So anyway, the big news is that if you remember this omnibus that was limited, signed or special illustrated, lovely thing. It's sold out. You can't have one. Um, and one of its selling points was that at the back it had a novella about Jalan and Snorri. Um, and it's 25,000 words of goodness about them sailing to America. Um, so now that the omnibus has been sold and it's been out for like 3 years or something, I've published the novella, which is called The New World. Um, Self-published it on Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited as well, so you can go and buy a copy. And it starts with some talk of nuns, though it's not connected with the Book of the Ancestor. Um, and there's some reader art of Jalan and Snorri. Um, and I've sort of made a song and dance about this on all of my social media, apart from this one. And also, I haven't put it on my newsletter yet because there's only three of those a year, and I've used two of them up. Um, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, this is a fairly minor piece of news. So anyway, I put that out there for general sale, and then a few days later, I have done a an analysis of the process. So um, and there are points to note here that most readers don't like short fiction. Short stories are an incredibly hard sell, and the other point I've written there is that short fiction is harder to write than long fiction. It's much harder to write um, I don't know, a 7,000 word short story than it is to write 3,500 word chapters in a book, because the short story has to do everything that a book does, but squeezed down into a much smaller space and therefore do it much more efficiently. So it has to have, generally speaking, unless you're getting really artsy, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the end has to wrap things up in an interesting way and hopefully tie in with the beginning in some sense. Um, they're difficult to write, and then they're incredibly difficult to sell. And when you do sell them, you're going to get sort of somewhere between nothing, $10, possibly if you've sold it to somewhere good, like the very top markets, a couple of $100. But the amount of work that you have put in means that on an hourly basis, even that couple of $100 is far below the minimum wage. And we're talking like a really small fraction of the minimum wage. And you're much more likely to struggle to get it placed anywhere for $10. And then the magazine into which you've placed it will have a really quite small circulation and very few people will read it. So readers don't like short fiction. Novellas, well, they're a bit longer, so there's a little bit more tolerance for them. But again, they are a hard sell. And you get sort of people looking at the book that wouldn't burn and saying, that's a quite a long book, and can I fit that in? But those complaints pale into nothingness compared to the complaints you get when you write short books. So, like, here's the word count of a whole bunch of my books from Red Sister to the book that wouldn't burn. So we're talking book wouldn't burn just about 200,000 words. Um, and here's one word kill at 59,000 and limited wish and dispel illusion at 70 something thousand. And people were just forever calling these novellas. They're not, their books. This little green column here is 40,000 words tall. And if you're 40,000 or above, you are a book. That's the entry requirement for the SPFBO, for example. These are not novellas. This blue box here, that's a novella, anything between 39,999 words and above, generally accepted about 17,500 words. Below that, it's a short story. Above that, and below 40,000, it's a novella. My novella, called The New World, sits squarely in the middle of that at 25,000. So I didn't expect The New World to sell particularly well. It's got a rocking a 4.71 average on Goodreads, which is very high. And I believe it to be an excellent story, very funny. Though when people say that something they've written themselves is very funny, well, it made me laugh, and I've had good reports of it. Um, but the reason I didn't expect it to sell well were, the first thing that I've already said, people don't like short fiction. It is essentially a sequel to the Red Queen's War trilogy. So I started writing a book that was going to follow the Red Queen's War trilogy, but I gave that up in favor of writing Red Sister. And the first chunk of that book is really pretty self-contained, and that became the novella, the New World, which is about Jalan and Snorri setting off for the shores of America. So it's basically Jalan suffering a long sea voyage, and yes, really suffering. He's not fond of boats. Um, and another reason I didn't expect it to sell well is because 1,000 of the people who were most interested in the Red Queen's War, i.e., those who would reach in and pay $100 for the omnibus, 1,000 of those already had a copy of it in the omnibus, and I will give anyone who has the omnibus a free electronic copy as well. And then later on, I made the novella free to the patrons on my Patreon if they're tier 3 and above. So a whole bunch of the very keenest people had already read it. And to reiterate, people don't like short fiction. And I'm saying here that I've written a whole bunch of short stories, and none of them have ever sold particularly well. Over here, I have on my mantelpiece the first check for writing I ever got, which looks like $31. Was from a magazine for a short story, and that short story took up a lot more than $31 worth of effort, and I had to send that story to lots of magazines and write lots of other short stories and send them out, and before I actually got anyone who would bite. And again, I doubt very many people have ever read that particular short story. If you want to sell lots of copies of a short story, then you're going to have to produce it when in the middle of an ongoing series or trilogy, and it has to support that. And then people who are really keen for the next book might go, "Oh yes, here's a short story to keep me going." And those tend to sell much better. So Bound has sold rather well, and I think has 4,000 ratings on Goodreads. In fact, I'd seen it on 3,999 and was encouraging people to give it one more rating, and you can see there it's gone up to 4,001. And while I was just searching on the book, I came up with this rather intriguing other title, a leather-bound volume produced in 1837, titled Mark Lawrence, or The Farmer's Dream, a domestic drama in 2 acts. So if anyone has a copy of that, I think that's something that I could well be interested in writing. Let me see, can I get my screen back? Yes. And the only other short story I've ever had large numbers of people read, I won't say sold, because during the dance has been on free on Amazon for many years. I've never charged for it. So the only money I ever made out of that was the $25 or so that I got from Fancy Magazine when it was first published. But that has several thousand ratings, I believe, on Goodreads. Anyway, so the novella, 25,000 words. Well, when I write a book like Prince of Thorns was 82,000 words, so the novella is essentially a third of Prince of Thorns. But typically, I will write 100,000 to 150,000 words. And I'm talking about words here because readers often talk about the number of pages in a book, but that's not a real indication of how long the book is, because if you make the font bigger, the number of pages increases and it's the same book. Um, so that 25,000 words is somewhere between a quarter and a sixth of my annual finished writing output. So I would hope that it would generate somewhere between a quarter and a sixth of the income. Otherwise, I'm sort of misspending my time there. And if I were to aspire as a fairly successful author to earn the UK average salary for people of any age, which is some £27,000 a year, then basically I would need that novella to draw in about $7,000 to justify its the time I had taken writing it. And as we're about to see, that is incredibly unlikely to happen. Though often I will spend time on something that produces significantly more, so it all evens out. But this was not time well spent, as it turns out. So I priced the novella at $4.99, just assuming that the psychology salesmen have used for eons of putting a penny below the nearest pound or dollar is got something to it. And I really don't think that most readers care what the price is within a sort of sensible range. Obviously, some people are working to tight budgets, and that will matter to them. But we're talking here, the difference between $2 and $4 is a fraction of the price of a cup of coffee in any coffee shop. So I think primarily readers are making their choices about what they're going to read on what they want to read, what's exciting them, what's attracting them, what's being talked about, rather than if it's $2 cheaper than the next thing. And it makes a big difference from Amazon because if you're self-published and you're selling on Amazon, if you sell a book for below $2.99, then only 35% of that price, that $2.99 or that $2, will go to you. And if you sell, and the rest goes to Amazon, 65%. If you sell it above $2.99, then 70% of the sale price goes to the author. So a $2 book will put 70 cents in the author's pocket. A $4 book will put $2.80 in the author's pocket. You've doubled the price, but you've got 4 times as much money per sale. So if you're going to halve the price and hope that that increases the sales, unless it increases the sales 4 times, then it's you're losing money. And is it really going to increase the sales 4 times? I highly doubt that. And so I priced mine at $4.99. And what am I saying here? Oh, yes, I just made a note to say that for a traditionally published author, which is most of my books, then the fraction of the sales of the cover that comes into your pocket is much smaller than 70% or 35%. In fact, on some books, like a highly discounted UK copy of Prince of Thorns, I can earn as little as 2.25% of the cover price. So 70% sounds like a dream. And obviously, you then have to sell far fewer copies to cover your living expenses if you're hoping to eat. Anyway, so I needed some cover art for my novella, and I thought it would be cheaper to use pre-existing cover art. So I went to Jason Chan and said, can I license the use of this cover art that's on the omnibus for my novella? And he said it would be $200 for the worldwide rights to do that, which was very generous of him. And I took him up on that. And even more generously, my beta reader, Mitchell Faywood, author of Gamble of Gods, which you should read, just did the lettering for me, the designing. So she fiddled with the color balance until you could see a lot more of the Jason Chan's art, and designed the cover, which is obviously something I'm totally incapable of doing. I don't have the eye for it or the tools. Um, and so that cost me $200, which means that I need to sell 57 copies of the novella in order to cover the costs of all of that before I make a penny. And here's how the book the novella sold for the first 4 days. So you can see on the first day, and this is after me hitting all of my social media, it sold just under 57 copies. So I hadn't covered the cost of the art. I started making money on the second day. By the third day, the number of sales were decreasing. So the blue column is the number of sales on any given day. On the fourth day, they'd gone down to 18 copies, and then this column is made up of the previous columns all stacked on top of each other, so it's the cumulative um, sales. So on by the fourth day, I'd made 185, and it was looking like it was really going to level off. We'll find out because we are on the fifth day now. But my expectation is that that's it's this just going to tail off and off, and this is going to get flatter and flatter, and it will take a long time to reach 200. Unless all of you lovely 2,200 YouTube subscribers rush out and get your copy now. So what have I made? 185 times 5 times 0.7, take away the $200. I've made $447 of the 7,000 that I would need to sensibly cover my time at the average salary for anyone in the UK. And it's not going to make that, is it? So in terms of time invested, it's not been a wonderful thing, though. It may have helped sell the omnibus a bit, and it may have drawn a few people into my Patreon. So you can't discount that entirely. But the point is that it's very hard to sell anything, any books, as all of the people in the SPFBO will know. I think the great majority of books entered into the SPFBO have fewer than 50 ratings on Goodreads, and that generally means just a few hundred sales. And these people have been doing their damnedest to sell. Often this is their only book, and they've been trying all their ways to sell it. It's hard to do. And here's me. I think I say I list my social media channels later on, but I think it's like 35,000 people on Twitter that I broadcast this news to, 10,000 on Facebook, and 51,000 followers on Goodreads, and we get the 185 sales in 4 days, and that's looking like the sum total of it. And I was getting people asking me about audiobooks, someone saying, where's the audiobook? And some of them actually saying, why isn't this on audiobook? As if it was somehow like I was shorting them. I was just too damn lazy to do it. Well, there is a small element of being too damn lazy, but it's also to produce an audiobook, certainly to a decent standard, typically is around $350 per hour, per finished hour. You can get cheaper deals with less known narrators, and you can set up deals where you and the narrator will share royalties. But if you just want to pay them and then go, and you want a good one, it's $350 per finished hour, and maybe it might be 500 or 600 depending on where you go. And this is a novella, so it's going to take about 3 hours to read. So it would cost around about $1,000 for the audio. And if I put that, so I had the little red line I needed to exceed to pay for the cover art there, I put a red line to pay for the art and the audio, it would be up there. And you can see I'm very unlikely to reach that because this curve is trending off here. And that would be a net loss. Above that line, I start making my first dollar if I've made an audiobook. And yes, the audiobook might sell me more copies and I might make more on it, but it's a gamble I'm not prepared to take. I don't believe that it would sell a sufficient number of copies, and it would involve more of my time. It's not just sort of fire it off and forget about it entirely. It does take some effort finding the narrator and negotiations. So that's where the lazy comes in. But that's why there's not going to be an audiobook, and that's why you don't get audiobooks for a large number of self-published books, just because it's not until you know it's going to sell in the thousands that you know it's worth that investment. And that's really the topic of this video. I urge you all to go and buy yourself a copy of this, because it is, I'm told by people who have read it, who have never read the trilogy, uh, they enjoyed it. Wasn't confusing. It was self-contained, and it made them want to go and read the rest of the books, because it was a good introduction to the characters. And if you have read the books, then this is more Challen and Snorri winding each other up. So I hope you will enjoy it, and I'll save any other info I've got about the book that wouldn't burn sales for another video. I will sign off and save you from having to look at my nasty t-shirt anymore, if I can find the button which will turn this off. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.